Welcome to Reddit Aliens. When I was 17, I believe I saw a demon. Does anyone believe they've ever seen a supernatural or alien being? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
When I was about 17, I woke up in the middle of the night thirsty, and I went into the kitchen to get some water. When I walked into the kitchen and flipped on the light, I saw what I can only describe as a large, golem-looking creature. It looked me in the face and then screeched, a noise I will never forget, and then crawled on the walls into the unlit part of the house. Well, I wasn't sleeping or dreaming. I ran into my room and turned on music and did not sleep the rest of the night. I've only told a handful of people about it, and yes, I am completely serious. I'm not sure about the supernatural, and I consider myself somewhat of an agnostic, but once when I was younger, something happened that I can't explain. I was selling lottery tickets for my soccer team and was walking the streets of my small town going door to door with my tickets. It was winter, so it was pretty dark outside, and I was at the end of my round. Suddenly, I see my neighbor standing under a streetlight with his big dog. As I came closer, I could see he looked very serious. He was staring at something far away at the end of the street and didn't seem to notice me approaching. I knew him, so I stopped a couple of feet away and asked, "Are you buying any lottery tickets today, Mr. Person?" He didn't answer. He just stood there gazing. I shrugged and walked home. The next day, his death ad was in the paper, and I know those ads take a couple of days before they get published. My sister and I were at a bedroom in a B&B in Ireland. We chatted for a while, then turned out the lights and got ready to sleep. The radio on the bedside table came on, in between stations, so that it was half static and half Gaelic, Irish. We couldn't understand. We tried turning it off, but the switch was already off. We stopped it by unplugging it. As soon as we'd done that, a knocking sound came from inside the cupboard. We opened the cupboard to find a door in the floor. It had a handle and hinges, just like a door in the wall, but in the floor. As soon as I touched the handle, the knocking stopped. The door was locked, so we never saw what was there. On 2 separate occasions, I have seen a figure standing in my bedroom. The first time I was 8 to 9, the second time was last year. Starting about 2 to 3 years ago, I began hearing 2 distinct voices in my house. One is a female voice, the other male. The weirdest part about it is that I think the female is a lot more benevolent or pranky than the male. Like when I'm home alone, I'll hear what I think is my mother calling me from downstairs, only to go down and realize no one is there. Once I came home and opening the door, I heard the female voice say, "Oh, he's home," to which I replied, "What's for supper?" When I realized that it wasn't my mother, I yelled out, "It's not funny," and then heard laughter, not evil laughter, just a "haha, we got him" kind of laughter coming from my bedroom. The male voice has never done anything particularly malevolent, but I have heard really loud screaming in various parts of my house. Once, when I was about 10 or 11, I got into a habit of covering my head with a blanket. As I was lying in bed, I heard a voice right next to my head say, "Do you want what? We know you're still there." That wasn't a fun night. I've also heard the male voice singing what sounded like an Irish folk song. It all sounds a bit insane, but that's only because I'm giving about 10 years of stories in a couple of paragraphs. These things don't happen every day, usually months apart when I've stopped thinking about them. When I was 14, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth before bed. As I was walking out of the bathroom, I noticed the shower curtain close a little. I thought my brother was trying to scare me, so I opened it and said, "I saw you." But when I opened it, there was a lady standing there, not my brother. I screamed and ran out. My brother heard and went to check the shower, but no one was there. I know what I saw, and it still scares the shit out of me. I never used that bathroom again. I don't believe it was supernatural in retrospect, but when I experienced it, it freaked me the F out. I was in Korea over the summer in middle school, living at my relatives' places. In Seoul, pretty much everyone lives in an apartment. One of my relatives lived in a particularly run-down complex. There was a general store right next to the apartment complex, and it was usually safe to go there even at night. So I went to go get some ice cream at around midnight. I walked back, and the bottom floor was quite dark. I went into the elevator, pressed the button for my floor, and waited a few seconds. Then the door opened on another floor before mine. There was this woman in a white dress with long black hair just standing near the stairs, sort of shrouded. She didn't get in or move. She was very still, and far away enough that I couldn't get a clear view of her face. Effing shit bricks as I went up the elevator, crickety sounds and all. Most likely it was just some random woman with a white dress, but the whole situation was just a huge Asian horror movie setup.
Well, that would be a pretty frightening image for anyone if an elevator opened to something like that. But I think someone might have been having a little bit of fun with you.
My sister once woke up and saw my brother on the couch eating chocolate looking demonic. Thing is, he was on the top bunk bed and she could see his arm hanging. So, the one on the couch was something else. She faced the wall and forced herself to ignore it. When I was 15, my friends and I were in a field behind one of their houses. It was about 1:30 a.m. We'd been out there for hours when suddenly my friend Gabby says, "What the F is that?" We all turned to see this very large creature with glowing red eyes lying on the ground with Gabby's dog and cat. We all start screaming and get up to run away. I turn around at one point to see where my friends are, and the creature starts standing up. It must have been 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and what appeared to be wings. I can't tell you what it was, but I can say, when I saw the movie Mothman Prophecies a few years later, I froze, realizing it was almost identical to the creature we saw. I have no idea what happened, and I do not know what to believe about this. I was watching TV when suddenly I heard a searing pain in the back of my neck. When I looked in the mirror, 5 wounds were on the back of my neck, in the spots where fingertips would be. I was sitting on a couch. Nothing sharp got near my neck. Still can't explain it. I was 10 years old and on vacation with my parents in Thailand. I was eating at a pretty good local restaurant in town. Towards the end of the meal, when I headed to the restroom, I noticed that the door to the only toilet was locked. I couldn't hear anyone on the other side. I waited for 10 minutes, knocking on the door every so often. The door to the room had an old-fashioned keyhole, and I eventually looked in to see if anyone was even in there. I see a wide-opened eye just staring back at me. I even did a double take, and he blinked the second time. I just noped the F out of there as fast as I could and asked my parents if we could leave. When I was 5, my mom was checking out a Bed Bath & Beyond. I was looking at one of those racks they have by the checkout. All of a sudden, I couldn't find my mom and thought she had left without me. I started to walk out the automatic doors when I saw a person standing there with wings telling me to go back inside. I swear on my life this happened, and I believe it was my guardian angel. I'm aware I sound like a crazy person. When I was about 8 or 9, my father took me out for a walk in the bush on the weekend. My mother and sister were overseas visiting family members. The forest was about 45 minutes of walking, and eventually you would end up at a graveyard. Being a curious kid, I was looking at the graveyard thinking how nice the flowers are, and how nice the stones looked. People put stones on graveyard-colored ones. One I remember was green and white, so I picked it up, raced up to my dad and said, "Daddy, look." My dad gave me a serious look and said, "Where did you find this?" I said, "That gravestone over there." I pointed. My dad told me to put it back, and we never spoke anything of it and continued on our way back to our car. On the way home, my dad got dinner and a toy car, which you had to build yourself. I spent about 2 hours that night building it and went to bed. Next morning, I got up very early and continued building the car to put things in context. My room was on the 2nd floor, and I was facing towards the window for better lighting, I guess. Suddenly, halfway building, I look up and there I saw it. A person, which I can't remember his face properly, was looking at me for a good 5 seconds. Then he turned to his left and went up. Very shocked and confused, I went into my dad's room and snuck into his bed. He was still asleep. I told him later that day, and he believed me, saying it was most likely because you touched that person's grave. I've only told a handful of people, and it still scares me to this day. I have another recent story I can tell you guys. Send me a message if interested. TL, DR. 9 years old me, boy, took a rock from someone's gravestone. The spirit, ghost, demon, or whatever came to my house to scare me. This story is 100% true. I was 100% awake.
I know different cultures do different things when they visit their deceased relatives and friends. Do you do anything unusual to other people?
When I was in the hospital last year, I saw the same ghost in my room twice. I've posted the story before, but it's not as interesting as most of the other stories on here. The ghost kinda looked like a 3D shadow of a person. It was shaped like a smaller old lady in a gown with the typical grandma haircut. It wasn't scary, just odd and interesting. I wasn't on any drugs that would make me see things either. I had gone down to our basement fridge to get a carton of milk out. Well, when I turned to look towards the unfinished part of the basement, I clearly saw the outline of a man's upper body. I ran upstairs screaming that someone had broken into our house and to grab the sword. I returned downstairs, sword in hand, only to discover that no one was there. Like they have a sword. I had two occurrences in the winter of 2009. The first was one morning when I was getting ready for work. It was about 6 a.m. My apartment was dark, and my front door was open because my girlfriend was just outside smoking, waiting for me. I was doing something in the living room, and I saw a figure move past me in my peripherals. I assumed it was my girlfriend. I shivered for no reason. The figure had moved towards the back of the apartment, so about 20 seconds later, I called back and asked if she was ready to go. She poked her head from outside and said yes. I freaked the F out and ran outside. She swore nothing went in the apartment. Fast forward about 2 weeks. I dismissed what had happened as grogginess and moved on. I didn't have a car at the time, and my girlfriend wasn't around that morning, so I was walking to work. It was about the same time as the last event, a dark winter morning. Once again in my peripherals I saw a figure moving, seemed to be keeping pace with me. I just got goosebumps typing this, wow. It was to my left, a wide open field area with some trees. When I looked over, there was a shadowy figure mirroring my exact stance about 30 feet away. I didn't think, didn't scream. I just took off. Full sprint the last 3/4 of a mile to work. Haven't experienced anything like it since. Don't know how I feel about it to this day. I've deduced that I'm mildly insane after all the things I've seen or heard, but I'll share some of my stories because crazy or not, I believe everything that has happened. Sorry if this is long. I grew up in an old house. My parents still live in it. It's about 150 years old or so. When I was about 8, I swear I experienced interaction with a spirit. I was sitting on my bed playing with my stuffed Simba when my lace curtain moved. It didn't sway in the breeze. My window was shut and the air conditioning was off. Half of it filled out, resembling a full 1800s style skirt. It only filled out half of the curtain, rounding out and then abruptly laying against the window. I heard a young girl's voice. Being a child, I wasn't scared, I was just curious. It asked my name, and when I answered it told me its name and age. Elizabeth. She was 9. She had a long, pretty dress with lace and hair that curled like Shirley Temple's but went to her waist. She had this large white bow in her hair. I talked to Elizabeth for a few years. I'd ask her questions about where she's from, did she have any siblings, what's her favorite thing to do. When I was upset, she would sometimes appear at the edge of my curtain, would brush lightly against my face, as if a hand brushing away tears. I never told anyone about her when I was young because I was afraid I'd get teased. When I was just shy of being 12, she came to me one day. She didn't talk, just appeared in my curtain. I asked if she was okay, and she replied she was cold and lonely. Right then, my curtain filled fully, and a new voice, named Sarah, came, saying she had to take Elizabeth away. It was the last time I ever heard from Elizabeth again. At 20, when I go home and can't sleep at night, I call out her name softly and wait for my curtain to come sweeping out like before, but it never does. I know it sounds like an imaginary friend, but imagination can't control how a fabric moves. Imagination can't create names and fashions that are common in a century I didn't even know about. Another less nostalgic episode happened about 3 years ago. Me and a friend had snuck out to see a boy. We met him in his car and listened to music for a few minutes. He was cute, but a stranger. Maybe had said 5 words to the guy before. My friend and him started kissing and doing things while I sat uncomfortably next to them. I get out of the car and run back to her house in the pouring rain. When I get to her room, I throw most of my wet clothes off and sit on her sister's bed in the dark. At first I was pissed. She goes at it with a guy I thought was cute. Then I panicked, realizing that neither of us knew him well. He'd done crazy jail time worthy things, and my best friend was in his car alone. I couldn't breathe and put my knees to my chest trying to get air slowly. I started to hear this shrill, inhuman chattering sound and looked around. My friend's bed was pushed into a corner, and on the wall there was a black figure. It had spindly arms and legs and a body that hunched at an extreme angle. Its fingers were long with an extra joint. It loomed over her bed, bending almost halfway over it. She came into the room, throwing light on the wall, and it vanished. She saw me with my hands over my ears trying to keep the sound out, hyperventilating, staring at her wall. I didn't sleep all night, just staring at her wall, making sure it didn't come back for her. Along with those two distinct memories, I hear things all the time. Footsteps in an empty house, whispers, noises that are too strange to be animals or wind. I get chills when I walk into certain rooms of my parents' house. Sometimes when I'm walking home alone at night, the wind will blow leaves towards me from behind, and I'll hear a soft shouting that sounds like cursing or a foreign language. I often see shapes shifting or figures moving in my peripheral, but when I turn to see clearly, it vanishes.